New York Mayor Bill de Blasio enjoys flying around his city by helicopter, but make no mistake, he is a true warrior for the climate, and you can tell because he's using taxpayer money to sue oil companies over climate change. He puts other people's money where his mouth is. Pretty clever. Ken Ward is a climate activist. He said he'd go further. He says it's okay to break the law for the sake of climate change. Ken Ward joins us tonight. Hey, Ken, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I just heard you call somebody a, what was it, demagogue, little...
that was then, this is now, Ken. Totally different segment, different guest. I'm glad to see you
Sitting
here.
Wondering what I got myself into, but thanks for having me.
Come on. No. I don't do that unless incited. But let me ask you this, and I'm not going to call you that or hopefully anyone else that ever again. I hope I won't have to. But why can the mayor of New York call himself a warrior against climate change if he uses a helicopter to get around a city when he could take public transportation?
Oh, we get those kinds of questions all the time, and I can't speak for the mayor of New York, of course. But no, I think it is a very fair question. I think that we're trying to change an entire system here. Partly you can do that by your own behaviors,
right?
And I think that's exemplary. And so, yeah, I would think that anybody who's concerned about climate change ought to be very concerned about their own, carbon impact. And at the same time, we're trying to achieve political change in America as it is. And it's very hard to do that without, burning some fossil fuels.
Sure, I understand that, and I mean that there are practical limits to people's ability to live out their beliefs. But I do think it calls into question the sincerity of a person who's framing the debate in moral terms if he falls so far short. In other words, if I'm a spokesman for PETA, but I operate a slaughterhouse on the side, I'm less believable. Does that make sense?
It totally does. I don't think climate change is being framed entirely in moral terms. It's being put in practical, pragmatic terms. We're facing the cataclysmic climate change that has moral implications, but it's got, practical living implications.
Right.
So,
So how is it that in pursuit of living out your opinions on climate change, you believe you ought to be allowed to violate the law?
I'm not sure I'd say I want to be allowed to violate the law. What I believe is that in taking the actions such as we recently did, when we face charges and when we go to court, it is appropriate for us to be able to explain to the jury why we did, what we did. And to be able to call some expert witnesses that would testify to the facts as we understand them. That's it.
But that's not. But that's not really an act of conscience, then. I mean, typically when people protest what they think is an unjust system and are punished for it, they say part of the action, part of the reason it's a noble action, is because they accept the consequences and say, yes, I know it's against the law, I did it anyway. Why don't you do that?
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to get off here. Certainly, anybody who engages in direct action, if you're going to stand there and get arrested, is with the expectation that you may well be punished for it. I mean, in the action that I did after 2 trials, I was convicted of burglary. I'm not protesting burglary. I've had my house broken into. I think burglary laws are good. All I'm saying is I'd like to be able to explain to the jury why I did what I did, and call some experts, and then it's up to them.
Do you think the guy
who
shot...
can decide. I've now said...
Right, no, I understand that. But does this right, do you think, apply to others? Do you think the guy who shot George Tiller, the abortionist, or any of the other abortionists who've been murdered by anti-abortion activists ought to be able to explain their position to a jury, and perhaps that would be exculpatory?
I do not think this should be an easy process by any means. It is a difficult one. Rarely do judges allow, presenting a necessity offense. If you do present the necessity offense, there's some really high hurdles that you have to. And I think that easy process by any means. It is a difficult one. Rarely do judges allow, presenting a necessity offense. If you do present the necessity offense, there's some really high hurdles that you have to, and I think that's appropriate. I don't. Do
you think anti-abortion activists should be allowed to do that, though?
Well, first of all, the example that you mentioned was violent. I'm committed to nonviolence.
Well, how
So,
about
no.
blocking a clinic?
So blocking a clinic, I think that if people believe that this is, you know, what, actually I think the pro-life movement is pretty comparable in a lot of ways to the political situation that climate activists face, which is a insoluble problem that the mainstream politics, and in this case both parties, are not dealing with. Though, you know, that's the classic situation.
All right. Well, that seems like a fair
action.
position. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for explaining that.
I think it's a fair position, yes.
Nice to have you on.